conference. My name is Jeff Anderson. I'm with Audio Enhancement, and we are the sponsor of this session. We'd like to start off by, again, welcoming everybody to the session and start off with some housekeeping items. First off, we have registration confirmation. So at the end of this session, we will provide you an exit ticket code that will register you for attendance at this session. We'd also like you to download the FASA app that will give you access to the leaderboard for prizes and different updates of the conference throughout this week. We also have an official hashtag of #FASA conference, and we're encouraging people to take pictures and post using that hashtag on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., so that we can share with each other what we're doing and what we're learning this week. There's a couple of Zoom features that we want to review for you. There will be a chat feature, so where you can share your ideas. We'll also post some of the other codes during this time, and you can ask questions of Jerry during this presentation so that we can have, and he can see the questions and answer the questions for you. You can also, there's a raise hand feature that will allow the moderator to unmute your line, and you can ask a question if you'd like to respond that way. So we're really excited about that. Now, just to introduce myself again and the company, many of you are teachers in Florida and principals in Florida and know who we are. There's a good majority of your classrooms that have audio enhancement in them in the state of Florida. It's actually the state that we have more than any other state in the country. It's a microphone that a teacher wears that kids can hear no matter where they sit and no matter where the teacher is. Now, what has been interesting is the last few weeks we've had calls come in about the next normal and coming about post-pandemic, what's going to happen. And so we've done some testing, and most people have said, well, post-pandemic, the next normal might be that the teacher is going to be wearing a mask. And we don't know that that's going to be the fact come this fall. But we have done some research, and with social distancing and with teachers wearing masks, a classroom might look just like this come fall. So we, again, took questions to this, and teachers said, if I have audio enhancement in my classroom, will it work if I wear a mask? And we wanted to move forward and do some testing on that. So I placed a call to a good friend of mine, Ron Clark, in Atlanta, Georgia, and I asked him the question, and he said, I don't know, but let me go do a test for you. And so he did a little test, and then we did some more scientific data. So real quick, here's a short video about Ron and a possibility of a mask in the classroom.
So everyone, I wanted to show you an example of how this works. So in my classroom, and let's say, for example, I had to wear a mask. Now, I don't have a mask, but I'm going to use this sheet, this shirt, just to say how it would work. So if I cover my mouth and I'm having to talk like this, it's going to be really hard for all the kids to hear what I'm saying. Now I'm going to show you an example of audio enhancement. If I press and turn on audio enhancement, all of a sudden, every child can hear me. You can hear me clearly, and I don't have to strain my voice. Audio enhancement projects your voice throughout the entire room so that everyone can hear you, everyone feels that they have a front row experience with you, and then no one has to wonder exactly what you just said.
So as you prepare your schools or your classrooms to going into this fall, into the next normal, we did do some data because we wanted to find out what we needed to do with the equipment and what was going to be lost if a teacher was wearing a mask. With that being said, we did this scientific study where green is optimal, yellow is better intelligibility, and blue is limited. And as you can tell here from the far left, that is what the data would show. And you want green and yellow, but the far left shows no, with a teacher with no mask and no audio enhancement, which is good. Not as good as they could be with a microphone, but that's a good sign. If they add a mask, you can see how much intelligibility is lost without a microphone. But if you add a microphone and have a mask on, you actually see the data to the far right, which is a lot more of the optimal and a lot more of the better intelligibility. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention. We have both, you know, we want to help your schools no matter how you want us to help you. Like if we can get your current systems up and running, or if you need other systems, we have installed systems, and we also have portable systems for the classroom. So that's what we've been doing that way. We also have a technology that uses cameras in the classroom. It's called ViewPath, and it allows teachers to record, create a lesson, manage a lesson, and deliver a lesson to their teachers. But there's not always in the classroom. There's 4 ways actually to create the lesson. You can create it through your classroom camera. You can also create it through a webcam, or you can create it through a mobile device. So, and it all goes into something called Your Workshop or My Workshop, where all the lessons are actually created and managed so that they can share these lessons with students that might not be there. Because oftentimes people are talking to us, again, about the next normal and saying, well, what if only half my class shows up? How can I still deliver the lessons? And this is a great way to do it. And then last but not least is you can do it either recorded, or you can do it live, or you can do it simultaneously that way. So we just wanted to educate you guys on some of the things that are out there already proven that teachers have been calling and asking us about a lot. So, all right, so here is the code. It's AUD 27. That is the code for the free prizes and the points. So you want to enter that in. And then at the end, we're going to give you another code that shows that you attended the complete session. So let me introduce Jerry DeLuca as our presenter today. And we're excited to have him and all of the amazing attributes that he has in his bio and the things that he's going to be talking about. The title of this session is Ethical Change or Challenges in Remote Learning. Jerry is the strategic advisor at ETS and is responsible for new business initiatives and the outreach. My screen doesn't show everything of the professional education or program. Let's see. There we go. A career educator with 25 years of classroom teaching, Jerry earned extensive recognition for his excellence in teaching as both a Mikan educator and a national presidential awardee for excellence in mathematics and science teaching before coming to ETS. And Jerry began his career at ETS in 1998 as an assessment developer and was quickly promoted to director of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards Assessment Program. Under Jerry's direction, ETS developed, delivered, and scored all 27 certificate areas for the National Board of Professional Teaching Standards. And in his 21 years at ETS, Jerry has become an expert in many facets of assessment development and delivery, working on a variety of ETS's major programs, including PEREX, the Texas Teacher Licensure, and certification programs, the California Teacher Performance Assessment, Washington ProTeach, K-12 Student Assessment, and High SCT. So prior to serving in his current capacity as a strategic advisor, Jerry most recently served as the National Director of Client Relations for PEREX and ETS Custom Teacher Licensure Program. He earned both his bachelor and master's degrees in Earth and Space Science from California University of Pennsylvania. So long, extensive bio there, Jerry. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly, but we're extremely excited to have you educate us today.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate that. Wasn't necessary you read that. I thought that would be posted somewhere. If people wanted to read it, they could. But I think the important things there is a career educator. Consider myself a teacher, 25 years in a classroom. You know, I wonder how long I can get street cred out of that, but I still feel that that's a big part of who I am. I've been at ETS for 20 years now and working on some great programs. So suffice to say that. So I am going to share my screen, bring up my PowerPoint, and we're going to get started on this. So I believe this should work. At least it has worked every time I've tried it thus far. And so we're going to go to So hopefully everybody is looking at a PowerPoint slide that says the Discover Conference for FASA and ETS Prethka. Is that correct? So
Yes.
hearing, very good.
Right.
So, so hearing hearing nothing but positive, some positive feedback there. Let me get started. So, okay, the introduction. Thanks, Jeff. First thing I want to do is I want to thank FASA for the opportunity to present and be here today. Obviously, I'm sure that the folks at FASA just went through their manual. How do you move a face-to-face conference, okay, with the flick of a switch, okay, to a remote conference? And so that manual, I'm sure, existed. They got all the answers they needed. Here we go. I just want to say, what an ambitious undertaking. We are proud to be part of this and hope to contribute in a very meaningful way, okay, to the experience. So to John, Michelle, and Heather, and everyone at FASA to pull this off on behalf of your members, I think it's a great opportunity. And thank you. Appreciate it. I want to share a little bit about ProEthica before we start talking in earnest about some of the information that we want to share with you today. ProEthica is a framework for ethical decision making. ETS is most known for their high stakes assessment. That's not what ProEthica is. ProEthica really falls more in the professional development range of products, something a little bit different for ETS. We have a new division called if you will, the professional educator programs, and we're looking to establish programs that fill in some of the gaps that educators find themselves, whether it be this ProEthica around ethics in education, whether it's around social and emotional learning, whether it's around culturally responsive teaching. We're looking to give educators tools, okay, that help fill those gaps. ProEthica is one of those programs. So what I want to talk about is one of the things that ProEthica sponsored recently is a webinar that we had on May 4th. And that webinar had a very distinguished panel. Ann McMullen, an education leadership consultant, actually moderated the panel. And those individuals that served on this panel were Lynette Tai from Playwell. Playwell provides strategic advice on issues of privacy and industry self-regulation. Dr. Daniel Dominic, who is the executive director of the American Association for School Administrators. Tom Luna was part of that, and Tom Luna, and wouldn't you know that my phone, okay, yeah, and that's my landline, my apologies. Tom Luna, former superintendent of schools for the state of Idaho, and actually is with the Strategist Group, a think tank based in Florida, and Dr. Jack Smith. Dr. Jack Smith was superintendent of, state superintendent of schools for the state of Maryland. And currently, he is the district superintendent of Montgomery County Schools right outside of Washington, D.C. Right? One of the reasons that I raised this issue about this panel that we sponsored on May the 4th was that a number of these individuals contributed a lot of good ideas. Those ideas are ideas we'll hear some things about today, and I wanted to give credit where credit is due. The other thing I want to say about this, we had over 3,000 registrants for this particular webinar. And if that doesn't indicate there's a need to talk about and to have some answers and some discussion around some of these issues, it certainly is a testimony to maybe what educators are looking for and need at this particular time. So at ProEthica, our mission is to reduce risk and promote a caring, supportive, and collaborative culture in the school community. All right? It's around ethical decision-making that establishes a standard of care for our students and for our school communities in general. All right? But how is that done in a remote learning environment? ProEthica was conceived on a traditional context of kids come to school, they're in the building, and But when the school goes away, how do you do that? We believe that the stakes are now raised on ethical decision making in this kind of online environment. There are a number of issues that deal with items that we're going to be talking about today in terms of student privacy. Um, we know that this type of learning will promote more engagement in social media, varieties of social media or digital kinds of learning. We know students are going to be looking into the homes of teachers, and teachers are going to be looking into the homes of students, and that raises the stakes in terms of what is going to happen in terms of remote learning. And we know that in terms of remote learning, we're already seeing headlines. Most of those headlines focus on how efficient and how good online learning is. But those headlines could change very rapidly. This unprecedented speed to move to an online environment. I mean, there's one thing to go quickly, and there's another thing to jump into the deep end with no life preserver. And so the whole idea of moving in this direction, how ready were schools to do this? And so what I want to do, uh, we would love this to be an interactive activity. If I'm in the room, I can see hands, I can see faces. Someone looks puzzled, someone has a question. That rich interaction that we get when we're all together. So we're going to have to manufacture that, and we need some cooperation in order to do that. So what we're hoping is that we can promote some interactivity. We can begin to have some dialogue around this. And so we're going to start with a poll of questions. We have a number of questions that we're going to engage you throughout this session, so it's not just a talking head, and we can share possibly some best practices and some information that you people are actually living this on the front lines can bring to enhance this particular session. So Heather, could you queue up the first poll, the first four questions of the poll? So there'll be four questions to this particular poll to get started. We're going to give you a minute or two to respond to these. Heather, I don't, if you can advance them so we can see questions 3 and 4. Actually, I can do that. Okay, I'm assuming you've had sufficient time to read through 4 questions and cast a vote. So I'm going to ask Heather if she can post the responses. Okay, so question 1, how prepared were you to pivot to online instruction? I would have been surprised, okay, if those answers looked a little different. I think that's probably standard. How effective was the move to online learning in your district? You can see the responses. what were you most concerned, or what are you most concerned about regarding remote teaching and learning? And then finally, 4, what resources do you need most adequately support remote learning in your district? So I would like to go back to questions 1 and 2, and I'm going to try to get some audience participation here because I am very interested in those districts that felt very prepared to move this quickly to an online learning environment and felt that this was it was done very effectively. If we could get some of those individuals to volunteer, okay, to respond to the to share with the group, okay, what were the circumstances that allowed you to move so quickly and feel that this was done effectively. So Heather, and I have my colleague Janet Cook with me. She's watching the chat feature, and I can't see the anybody raising their hand. So if that's a feature I'm supposed to be able to see, I'm not seeing that right now. Let me see if I can. Okay. So I'm not seeing anybody that's going to jump in, and so unless Heather or Janet can tell me differently, we will move on. So as we think about the ethical challenges in remote learning and what's happening in that regard, um, consider this. The Eureka School was the first one-room schoolhouse, was built in Springfield, Vermont in 1875. So we're talking about 2.25 century of getting on a bus, walking to school, having mom and dad drop you off and going to a building, sitting in a classroom and having instruction. Just as John and Michelle and Heather didn't have a manual to go to move this to a virtual conference, there's no manual with the answers that we need now. I don't think there's one place you can go and get all these particular uh, answers for us. And so this particular session is about increasing awareness around 3 points of emphasis: student data privacy, digital equity, and leadership. And so at this time when teachers, many are going to need guidance, they're going to want to make sure that they're using best practices, they have the support that they need. It's going to be very important that we have these conversations and we determine that we're moving in a direction that's safe space for students, teachers, and the community at large. The road ahead is going to be daunting. You're not going to be able to do and address everything all at once that that you would like to, but hopefully at the end of this session, we will have caused you to think about some things and think through some things that will be absolutely essential to moving this in the right direction. So before we talk about student data privacy, I want to consider how roles have changed. This thrust, okay, of let's go to remote learning, all right, in a heartbeat. A couple of things. One is it was thrust upon us, but we should probably embrace this as an opportunity. Um, For many educators, this rapid change only magnified the challenges that they have with technology, issues of privacy and appropriate, how you handle data in appropriate manners, and the need for new ways of teaching. I mean, this shouldn't be, maybe we are concentrating and focusing on something we should have done a long time ago. This is not the overhead projector. How long did it take to get teachers off the overhead projector and begin to embrace technology? And so it's a very different role for educators, and they're going to have challenges in doing this. For many parents, the rapid change has put them in a very uncomfortable new role. Consider when students go to school, the teacher stands in place of the parent. Now we're asking the parent to stand in place of the teacher. They may be uncomfortable with technology. They have their own challenges. I can remember my parents asking me to program their VCR. I didn't get it. All right. Why couldn't they do that? Now I go to my children about the newest technologies and what have you. But parents may be uncomfortable with the technology, certainly uncomfortable with the content. They may have several students, 3, maybe 4 students in school. And now they're trying to be the teacher to those 4 students all at once in this crazy environment. And for students, the rapid change, all right, and I've heard, well, it's going to be easier for the students because they're more adept at technology, but the rapid change is going to demand greater personal responsibility for those students. Consider the shy student, all right, that student now finds himself on camera in front of everybody. Consider students that are going to be tourists in the classroom, all right. I talk about students being a tourist when they just sit there and they're along for the ride. All right. It's easy for them sometimes to hide even in a class and not get called upon, not raise their hand. All right. What's it going to be like for those students in this particular environment? So I think I'm a little clear on how the poll is going to work. So what I'm going to ask, okay, if Heather would bring up the next poll before we talk about student data privacy, this will seed our thinking around some of the privacy issues around students. If Heather, you could bring up the next poll, okay, this will be the next 3 questions we want you to respond to. Heather, if you could, I think that's probably sufficient time. If you could close the poll and share those results. So do you have a district policy or policies focused on student data privacy? All right. Majority of districts did, 71% did, 29% did not. Do you have a district communication plan to disseminate and explain your remote learning policies and expectations as they relate to student data privacy? Again, more do than don't, but that's somewhat more even. And then finally, actually, do you have a policy or policies governing the videotaping of students in a remote learning environment? So actually more don't than do. But one of the things I want to ask individuals, and that is, are these policies, were they existing policies? And are they specifically tailored to this new online environment? All right. I think that's an important question. I think a number of districts may have had some policies that are related and deal with these things, but do they deal with them in a manner that's conducive and actually tailored to the context of this new remote learning. And so I think that's an important consideration. And again, if I would love to have some dialogue around this, okay, I'm trying to see if indeed we do. And so I'm looking, but I'm not seeing anything, and I'm not hearing anything. Okay, I'm not seeing anything to help me out. So if my if
Hi,
yes,
Jerry.
yes,
Hi, Jerry. Jerry, this is Mary White from Martin County. How are you?
I'm doing fine. It's wonderful to have some social interaction. Mary, it's- please share what you would like.
So we've always had a policy for students' photograph to be taken. You know, we've always had that policy for a student's photograph to be in the yearbook, for a student's photograph or videotape to be taken at school, and parents can opt in or opt out of that. So what we just did was altered that policy to include the recording of lessons, let's say on Zoom for the teacher, or for photographs to be included. So that's what we did.
Excellent, excellent. Um, Other contributors now that we've conquered the issue of interaction. You know, I'd like to. This is a little out of uh, out of order, but I'd like to go back to the first group of questions, and if we have people now that we can get on online, would love to hear from somebody that thought that they did this particularly effectively and why. I think those would be great best practices to share. So I don't know if those that answered in the first poll that they felt that they were ready to do this and they did it pretty effectively. I would encourage you to share. I think that's extremely good to hear from people in the field that are doing this. And I think, Mary, what you say about the adaptation of policies, if you don't have to start from scratch, don't start from scratch. I think a lot of the things that people have in place may be adaptable. I think it will be important to adapt them, but certainly, you know, the fact that you have some starting place, I think, is excellent. Okay. So let's move on, please. Again, tough to read body language, but if somebody has something to say, please. The more interaction we have, the better. So in talking then about these issues of student data privacy, all right, one of the things that Lynette Attai said from Play Well on the May 4th webinar is to communicate and communicate and communicate. She indicated that the need to communicate was extremely important. So if you have policies, all right, are they good as is? Do you have to adopt those policies? All right. And when you adapt them, do you have a plan to disseminate that to teachers, students, and parents? Right. And that's going to be extremely important. So it's important also, all right, to make sure each piece of data that you collect, all right, is used for valid educational purposes. Don't collect a lot of information on students that's not necessary, all right? And so when you communicate these things, okay, and you are only collecting data that's important, all right, it's important that you make those policies and those expectations clear. That teachers have a very clear understanding. Students have a clear understanding. Parents have a clear understanding. All right, be transparent. And Lynette indicated What a lot of districts will want to do is they'll want to get into a lot of legalese, a lot of mumbo jumbo. That's not what is going to be helpful. All right. What's going to be helpful is to make things clear and understandable. And if that data is used for valid purposes and you can make that understandable, all right, that's going to be extremely important. Uh, they pointed out on the May 4th webinar that most parents are more concerned about privacy issues around their kids and than your students than they are about their own. So in that regard, all right, part of your training of staff needs to include that they keep privacy issues top of mind when interacting with students in their homes. And vice versa, when that student comes into their home, certainly be mindful of and respectful of what that environment, what that teaching environment should be on both ends. Um, the other thing that they talked about is to be very clear to demand from vendors, okay? There are going to be a lot of vendors that are going to want to be opportunistic. They're going to want to take advantage of the situation. I hate to say that. We know there are really wonderful, credible companies out there, and we know that there may be those that will want to be opportunistic. All right. Demand that, all right, these products, demand that student data privacy is a piece of what they're concerned about as well. Certainly don't rush to the newest technology at the expense of the student data privacy. So if you keep that upfront in mind, every step of the way, you're going to be much better off. One of the things that Jack Smith and shared from his experience as the district superintendent in Montgomery County, they've employed an individual whose full-time job is nothing but student data privacy. Looking at what it was, what it should be, how they make sure that that stays front and center of everything they do in this remote learning environment. Right. So Heather, all right. I'm going to check just to see if there anybody that wants to contribute to the conversation before we move on to the next poll. Okay. So the next poll is up. Okay. These are two important questions. Actually, this deals with digital equity, not student data privacy. So if we can answer these two questions, then we're going to talk a little bit about digital equity. Okay. Heather, if you could share the results with us. So what % of your students have adequate home access to support online learning? So 0 to 25%, all right, only 4%, 26 to 40%, to 50%, I'm sorry, 25% of you think that that's the percentage of students that have adequate support for online learning, all right, and so, and two, does your district have adequate infrastructure to support online learning? So as you look at that, the vast majority of you believe that to be true, okay? And one of the things that I want to bring to your attention is in terms of digital equity. Dr. Daniel Dominic suggested in the May 4th webinar that as much as 40% of the students in this country do not have access, all right, that teachers believe that they do in terms of digital equity. So this may be one of the biggest issues that we're going to have to deal with in terms of remote online learning. So if the projection of 40% of students do not have equal access, that is definitely an ethical issue that districts are going to have to deal with. I think it's a good plan to deal with remote learning in a plan that accepts the reality that students do not have equal access to technology at home. Um, and then the whole idea to focus attention on and begin to address the broader issues of inadequate, all right, support or antiquated infrastructure and support. Um, this is especially important in urban and rural districts. And so you think about in a brick and mortar school, people and you deal with things in a particular way. Students come into a classroom, you give them textbooks, okay? You give them instructional resources within the classroom. The next class comes in, they get the same thing. You would never think of giving those resources and textbooks to period 1 and not period 2. And then we'll give them again in period 3 and not period 4. This is a real issue. If Daniel Dominic is right and it's as high as 40%, this is something that's going to have to be grappled with. And districts aren't going to be able to solve this on their own. That's why it will be important to focus attention on this. How do you know where the gaps are? And how do you know if it's an issue of access, all right, or it's an issue of maybe students just not logging on? I think another best practice was shared by Dr. Smith from Montgomery County. They are actually tracking touch points. Has that student logged on? Have they had communication with the teacher? Have they turned in assessments? Did they pick up their paper package, okay, of instruction if they know that someone does not have access? So there are a number of things to be thought about, all right, in terms of digital equity. I'm checking to see if anybody has anything to share. Okay, in the chat, I don't see anything. But this is probably going to be the toughest issue to deal with. And even if it's 75% of your students do, how are you going to serve the 25% that don't have the digital equity and the digital access that you think? So this whole idea of digital inequity is going to be very, very tough, all right, to deal with. I did like Dr. Smith's monitoring, tracking, and touch points, tracking those touch points. I think that's going to be some type of active measures to determine where the gaps are and then how to mitigate those gaps. I think are going to be very important. So, and let me check one more time before we move on. I'm not seeing any other chats. So before we talk about leadership, we talked about student data privacy. Some things you need to think about. What are your policies around that? How are you going to communicate those? How are you going to communicate those effectively to teachers, parents, and students? And now digital equity. All right. Do you have a plan to deal with that? Do you really know? I'm interested to, those percentages, in our opinion, we think, or do we know? Have we polled? Do we have a good sense that those percentages are accurate? Right. Well, in terms of leadership, right, this is going to be another important aspect of remote learning. How do you lead these efforts? So, Heather, we have one more poll. Okay, I think these are 3 short questions on leadership before we discuss some of the strategies. Okay, and consider that. So these are actually questions on leadership. Okay, Heather, I think we've probably had enough time to respond. So we could share those results. So we're somewhat evenly distributed. I think it obvious that we think that there's going to be some type of blended education as we start back to school next fall. Um, we're still leaning to it's going to be more classroom instruction than not. All right. And, but interesting that nobody thinks that remote learning will be the primary method of instruction. Second question, do you feel remote instruction and learning can be as effective as instruction in a traditional classroom setting? 50% said no, and 29% said yes, and of course, 21% said they don't know. All right. And do you have dedicated staff supporting a remote learning environment? Nearly 30% have no dedicated staff. Okay, 1 or 2 individuals, 25%, and 3 or more, right? Which for me, of course, depending on the size of the district, and we didn't qualify that, that's somewhat surprising for me that there's that many individuals, okay, dedicated to remote learning environment. So, but that's good if that's indeed the case, if we have to move in this direction. Let me close that, check quickly to see if anybody has anything they want to share regarding that. So I don't see anything there. Okay, so let's talk about some of these leadership issues. All right. First of all, I would look for leadership. All right, from all directions. And are we seeing much leadership from the national level, from the state level, from the district level? I know that I have a daughter who is a nationally board certified teacher teaching in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is home of West Virginia University. And so it's a large, rather affluent district in, if you will, in West Virginia. But she's seeing a void in leadership. We had a conversation the other night, and I asked her about some of these things. She's seeing virtually nothing, okay, from the national level, and very little from the state level. All right, and so they're trying to do what many of you are probably trying to do, and that's lead efforts, okay, to deal with this remote learning environment that they were placed in. She said most of her support at the district level was from their instructional technology specialist. And essentially, she's getting lots of links. A link to this program, a link to that, a link to this, and not a lot of direction, not a lot of coordination of those links, but a lot of links, okay, to deal with. So that's probably not the best thing in terms of leadership, but these are extraordinary times, and U.S. school leaders are going to have to adapt. We talked about that in terms of policies, or develop your own strategies and policies. I don't know that I'd wait around to get a lot of help from different areas. I think we're going to have to do the best we can, figure these things out, okay, on our own. I would ask you to reflect on the past 6 to 8 weeks. What are the lessons learned regarding the risks and training needs, okay, involved with student data privacy and digital equity? All right. And as you consider that, I was hopeful that we could get, again, someone to contribute, okay, some lessons learned and what they believe, okay, is good, valuable information to share with your colleagues. I want to give, wait time. I'm going to give just a little bit of wait time. So somebody may feel compelled to join the conversation. Mary, you should get bonus points, okay, merit pay, all right, for being the only one to speak on the on the issues. Okay. So I'm not seeing or hearing anything. So I'm going to go rather quickly. We're closing in on the 3 o'clock hour. I want to make sure we get to some of these last points in terms of leadership. First of all, you're not going to be able to do this on your own. Dr. Smith from Maryland talked about on the May 4th webinar using collective IQ. All right, engage everyone, including teachers, including parents, including students. You're going to have some experience with this. Okay, a number of districts will have some experience with this to close out this year. And so engage folks in a meaningful activity to elicit feedback, to get some good ideas, especially those that were critical of what you've done or how things worked out. If go to your toughest critics. If we're not our own toughest critics in this, someone else is going to be. All right, and we, our children, they demand we do this as well as we can. We protect them, all right, and we educate them in a manner that's appropriate. Consider two issues, number 2 and 3 here. Sound instructional strategies in a remote learning environment. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we individualize instruction and personalize learning and deal with social and emotional learning? In the classroom, we're probably not doing as good a job in many cases as we should within the classroom even. How are we going to do this in remote learning? And again, you're not going to be able to answer all these questions on your own, but you have experts in your districts. You have experts in the disciplines. You have experts in technology. And so it's, true leadership here is going to be to help adapt and develop these kinds of policies and address these kinds of issues. Same thing with second language learners and special needs students. As a leader, I want to call your attention to one of the questions. Actually, we may have someone who'd like to contribute to this. Bethany in the chat room says she has a huge worry about our English language learners, okay, and ESE kiddos. Absolutely, all right. And so how do we address those? Bring those people who have expertise in these areas together, allow them to contribute in meaningful ways to deal with these issues. Here's a sad commentary, I think, to some of the stuff we're doing. I think as district leaders, you need to lead by example, all right? And one of the poll questions said, do you think this can be as effective as classroom instruction? And the majority didn't believe or didn't know if it could. So consider many teachers have been or still are skeptical of online learning. You yourself may be very skeptical that we can do this well. But yet those are the same people you're going to ask to lead these efforts. And so to lead by example is going to be an extremely important, I think, leadership skill, if you will, all right, to help get to the place where we want to be. If you're not comfortable in advocating for policy changes, I think you're going to need to consider that. You remember that funding formulas, school policies, they're all relevant in traditional education, but this has been anything since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. It's been anything but normal, okay, or traditional. So I'm going to share, if I will, okay. Jason, okay. The need to collect new data points next year, social media handles, TikToks, millions. These are the kinds of, thank you, Jason. These are the kind of contributions and conversations that the education community in your districts need to be having. And actually that was the goal of this session, is to get to that point, all right? And I think everybody should be prepared to develop a plan to hand out digital tools to students, okay? And all those tools should be software equipped for protection. We had a session the other day on funding. We do know that the CARES Act money, okay, is the most flexible. I'm not here to tell you that it can be used, but I'm here to tell you it should be explored as to how it can be used and can contribute to some of these efforts. So as we get close to the 3 o'clock hour, certainly ProEthica, we've looked at how we can do things differently. So we did sponsor 2 national webinars, okay, 2 free national webinars. I've referred liberally, okay, to the May 4th webinar we had. It was extremely, as I say, well attended, and it was very informative. We've developed at ETS in our large scale assessment programs. We've developed an at-home testing solution for our teacher licensure clients, okay, and some of our international testing programs. All right, and even in ProEthica, we developed a new module where we took pieces of the ProEthica program that's focused on technology, digital, and social media, and we've made that available, okay, to districts and to teachers. A matter of fact, it's if you will, it takes about 1 to 2 hours to complete. It hits on the technology and digital and social media that will only be relied upon more heavily. All right, and that program we're going to make available. Any teacher who wants some information, wants to think about this stuff, can enroll directly for that at $14 for the 1 to 2 hour module. If districts are interested in that, you know, it's an online platform, something they can use for their teachers. Okay, even if their teachers are at home, all right, we'll give them a discount to $10 per educator, and they can use that if they want then to put towards the full ProEthica program if later on, within 18 months, they would like to use that. So just things that we're trying to do to enhance the where we are right now. So I'll check the chat room, see if there's anything else here. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in particular. So I have 259. I want to recap very quickly. This was about increasing awareness. There are issues around student data privacy that we're going to have to make sure we have policies for, that those policies are tailored to not an online course, but actual remote learning of a magnitude that we've never seen. And again, not an online course where it's a controlled environment and here's your course. And this is something totally different. There are certainly issues of digital equity we can't ignore. And even high percentages doesn't mean kids won't get left behind. We need to advocate for infrastructure that allows for effective online instruction. And then finally, the leadership it's going to take that's necessary to move this forward in a way that does justice for students. So if you need further information, there are 2 websites there's a website that you can go to in terms of the ProEthica information that I just shared with you, the module that we've made available along these lines, and certainly thanks again to FASA for the opportunity to be here today. And just as online and remote learning is going to be different, this has been a little bit different for me. I'm a person-to-person individual, but hopefully we got enough information out of the session to make it worth your while. Thank you so much for participating. I'm going to check the chat room. So thanks. Okay. Somebody said great job. I'm not so sure. I would love to be able to be in a room with you and interact and see your faces. But thank you so much for spending this time with me. And so I will sign off. I guess I'm giving this back to Jeff. Okay. So.
All right, so now we're going to give you the code of the exit ticket. And the exit ticket for this great session that you all participated on is KMPEF. And I will type that in to this message also so that everybody can see it. But great job, Jerry. That was absolutely fantastic.
Appreciate it.
Are you saying F at the end of that? F?
Yeah, F at the end of it. I'm going to type it in right now so that everybody can see it. KMPEF. All right, again, thank you, Jerry. That was excellent. Great information.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it very much.
All right, thanks everyone that attended.